We're going to talk today about a topic that's going to get me yelled at a lot. We're going to talk about bigotry in the technology industry and how much it sucks. And we're going to hit it from a lot of different angles. But before I say the things that is going to get me yelled at, let's talk a little bit about why you should subscribe to the Lunduke Journal. You can subscribe via Patreon. Go to lunduke.com, click on the little Support the Lunduke Journal link over on the bottom left side. By doing so, and you can just pitch in $1, whatever, you get the comic strips that come out of the Lunduke Journal 1 week early. Did you know I did comic strips? Yes, I do comic strips. They're delightful. Along with an exclusive podcast, you can ask me questions. It's absolutely delightful. Everyone and their puppy should do that. So go do that. So I've written this out as an article because this is something I don't want to screw up. I don't want to screw up what I'm about to say because I don't want to get into extra trouble. So I'm going to read this article. I have a few interjections along the way. We got some charts. We got a lot of stuff to look at. I'm just going to read it to you here. Racism sucks. So far, so good, right? Sexism sucks. Heck, any type of bigotry and hatred, it sucks. And I stand pretty firm on that. And I think it's a safe bet that most of you out there in TV land feel the same way, right? I would posit that the bigotry problem within the tech industry, and possibly, I suppose, the rest of the world, though the tech industry is where I'm focusing, as that is the area I know the best. I don't know many parts of the world, I can't say. Tech industry, I know. I would say that the bigotry problem within the tech industry goes far beyond just racism and sexism. Age, religion, political discrimination, they run rampant. The bigotry and hatred within the tech industry is, in a word, bonkadoodles. Just a side note, I actually struggled for a long time to figure out what that word would be. That was the very last word I wrote in this article. I wrote the line, the bigotry and hatred within the tech industry is in a word, comma, space, and then I just drew a blank. So eventually I came back and wrote bonkadoodles. So there you go. Side note, look how long my hair is getting. Man, once quarantine's over, I'm getting a haircut. To illustrate this, back on topic. To illustrate this, I have some well-documented examples and a survey. First, a survey. First, let's talk about the preliminary results from that survey. So, this is a survey of tech bigotry. Which is a weird survey to have. So I sent around a very simple survey asking a variety of questions ranging from ethnicity and age to personal experience. The sample size for this, while larger than many presidential election polls, it was several hundred people, could still benefit from having larger participation. Just the same, it is certainly sufficient to take a first look at some of these issues. What I noticed was once it got to about the 150 or so poll participant point, that's a lot of P's, the number started to stabilize. And then as it hit 200 and on, it just kind of just stayed, within that general zone of everything. So I think these numbers seem pretty stable, but it would be nice to get some more into it. I'm going to leave the poll running for a while, and then I'll publish the results just kind of as a raw little CSV file. And then, people can kind of pick through it as they see fit. But this is the first preliminary results, and I think they're kind of interesting. So I'm going to read this chart here. The question was, have you personally been discriminated against in the workplace? So have you personally been discriminated? Not have you seen other discrimination take place with someone else, which was a different question in the same survey, but have you personally been discriminated against? So the answers ranged from yes, based on X, or no. So yes, based on ethnicity. So if someone's been discriminated against based on ethnicity, 9.1%. Yes, based on age, 10.2%. Yes, based on religion, 8.5%. Yes, based on gender, 11.4%. Yes, based on politics, 17.5%. Now, one of the big takeaways from the survey is that many people within the tech industry have been discriminated against. Personally, not witnessed, not heard of, they themselves have been the target of discrimination in one form or another. The most common basis for that discrimination was political affiliation, with 17.5% of respondents feeling that they had been discriminated against based on politics. Respondents who answered this way tended heavily conservative, because I also asked, if people identified as conservative, liberal, centrist, etc. So some people who identified liberal did say they had been discriminated against based on politics, but that tended to be mostly from people who identified as conservative. The second most common basis of discrimination from the poll was gender at 11.4%, followed by age, 10.2%, ethnicity, 9.1%, and religion at 8.5%, being the most common. Honestly, this wasn't exactly what I was expecting. These results are a little different than I expected. And then we got another one here. So I asked this simple question: if a coworker publicly supports President Trump, is that a problem? Right? Just yes or no. Yes, that's a problem. No, that's not a problem. It's a straightforward question, right? It's a little vague, but kind of intentionally so. Over 16% of respondents, 16.2%, felt that if one of their coworkers publicly supported President Trump, that would be a problem. The majority of those responding in this way identified in the poll as liberal politically. That same question was asked, but with President Trump replaced with ex-Vice President Biden. How many people felt it would be a problem if a coworker publicly supported Biden? Just a hair over 5%, less than 1/3 of the Trump version of the same question. Again, the majority of those responding this way self-identified as liberal. I thought it was interesting. This was the majority, the vast majority, not complete, because there were a few people who identified conservative and centrist who answered yes to this question, to both of these questions. But the overwhelming majority of people who answered yes identified as liberal. I thought that was interesting. This next question: do you feel comfortable speaking about your political or religious ideas publicly away from work without fear of negative impacts should coworkers see or hear them? Now, there were two separate questions in the poll. The first one was, do you feel comfortable speaking about your ideas, political or religious, at work? And this one is away from work. The at work version, the overwhelming majority of people, 70+%, 80+%, said, no, I do not feel comfortable talking about these things at work, which I get. That's been that way since time immemorial, I think. But this one I thought was interesting because 50.6% of the people surveyed do not feel comfortable talking publicly about religion or politics away from work. Over half fear negative impacts if a coworker found out about either their religious or political ideas. Again, this is for public discussions not taking place at work. I thought that was fascinating. Whatever is happening in the tech industry, at companies, conferences, etc., most people are clearly afraid to say what they think. This is not only backed up by this survey, but just about everyone I've talked to about the topic. Now, let's talk about a few examples where we can see some of the bigotry in action. I struggled to find a word that sounded less mean than bigotry, but bigotry is just what it is, right? And I want to take a note here that I'm going to name a few names. These are real people. And I want to make it very clear that I in no way want to see any sort of public backlash against these individuals. They are being mentioned here as examples of public personalities that have done something that has perpetuated this bigotry and helped to foster some of the problems that we just talked about above. I choose to believe that these are good people who made some mistakes, right? So I don't want people going on an attacking rampage where they go on the internet just bad mouthing these people. I don't want any of that. I don't like that sort of thing. It's not my jam. I am going to mention them by name because I feel like having the specifics here helps to bring some legitimacy to the issues being raised, and because these are all very, very public organizations and people, right? So it's not like it's just a random Joe Schmo who made an offhand comment on Twitter, right? That's not the sort of thing we're talking about here. All right, so let's start here. So back in July of 2018, I attended an open source conference. I've told this story once or twice before, put on by O'Reilly, known as OSCON, the open source conference. It's a big conference. During OSCON was a related mini event known as the Community Leadership Summit. It's a small little event actually put on by a friend of mine, and it's just this small thing that kind of piggybacks onto the bigger conferences like OSCON. Now, during that portion, a keynote was given. That keynote was from a principal architect at Microsoft named Scott Hanselman, who also happened to be one of the program chairs for the entire OSCON event, right? Very, very critical for the whole of the conference. Now, during his keynote, and realize this, we're not talking about a backroom presentation. We're talking about keynote, right? During that portion, so during his keynote, Scott Hanselman encouraged people, I'm going to read this very carefully, to not be, quote, just allies with women and people of color, but to be, quote, accomplices in the quest for diversity. He very specifically advocated for committing criminal activity specifically against white people and men, naming them very, very clearly. He said, and I quote, accomplices will go to jail with you. And just in case there was any confusion, he created an entire slide which read, and I quote, to create an inclusive tech environment, we need accomplices more than allies. He used the words crime and accomplice many times. For those curious, here is the definition of accomplice. Noun, a person who knowingly helps another in a crime or wrongdoing, often as a subordinate. Example, an accomplice in the murder. I've even got a picture here. If you're listening to the audio version, you go over to lunduke.com and you can check it out. There's a slide there that you can see an actual picture of the slide he created. He's a representative from Microsoft. He's one of the organizers of OSCON, an incredibly large corporate-run tech conference. And he actively encouraged people to commit criminal activity against others based solely on skin color and gender. That's a real thing that happened. And I don't think I'm making too big a deal about it. That's a pretty huge deal. It's pretty big. Advocating to become an accomplice in a criminal activity against a white or male person. Man. Switching gears a little bit to talk about one of the other examples. Remember how over 50% of people surveyed did not feel comfortable talking publicly away from work about their political or religious ideas? Well, that fear is well-founded. In November of 2019, the Linux Foundation banned a person from one of their events, KubeCon, for, as they stated, quote, tone policing, a term which does not exist within the code of conduct for the event in question. They banned a person for a code of conduct violation using a set of words that don't exist within the code of conduct. Now, this banning came after a public complaint was made on Twitter. That complaint consisted primarily of a picture of a soon-to-be banned person wearing a red MAGA hat. Regardless of what you think of of the politicians that well, regardless of what you think of President Trump, that is clear what the intention was, I think. Now, I and multiple other journalists have reached out to the Linux Foundation for comment or clarification. To date, no journalist, at least none that I am aware of, has received any response regarding this incident, and many of us have tried many times. It's very weird that they wouldn't have responded at all. If their intentions were other than to ban a person because of their political affiliation, it would be very easy for them to clear up. I even told them the words they would have to say to me that would be very easy and would immediately let them off the hook. They declined. A person went out in public, not at work, with a piece of clothing from a politician. There was a picture taken. It appears that this was the root cause for a punishment he received in his career, being banned from a tech conference. Makes me uncomfortable. And not because necessarily my political leanings even agree with that gentleman's. I don't want any companies banning people because they belong to Libertarian Party, Green Party, Democrat Party. I don't want to see that happen. That would be horrible. The third example. Are there other ways that companies and the people within them are making people feel afraid to be honest about their beliefs? Are there any ways that companies are doing that, even away from the office? What about the CEOs of the tech world? Surely they can't be engaging in or encouraging discrimination like that, right? An individual on Twitter sent a tweet to Melissa DiDonato, the new CEO of SUSE, which is the oldest Linux company on the planet, and said the following, quote, and again, this is the tweet someone on the internet sent to the CEO of SUSE. I left the SUSE family in 2010 because of how conservative, right-wing, exclusive, bigoted, and resistant to change it is. I like the changes that I'm seeing under your leadership. Okay. To which the CEO of SUSE responded, thank you. We are no longer those things. Just watch this space. Yeah. The tweet was promptly deleted and not replaced with another one. Thank goodness for screenshots. Holy smokes, that's a screenshot of it right there. So what exactly does this mean? If you take her words at face value, this means that the CEO of SUSE thinks that her company used to be conservative, right-wing, and bigoted, with the insinuation that those things are related. But that it is no longer those things, and she is happy about that, right? That is what she is literally saying, but perhaps she simply worded things poorly, right? Perhaps she doesn't actually think those things. I make mistakes in talking all the time. When you say enough words out loud, you eventually make mistakes. I make mistakes writing. I make mistakes talking. Sometimes just the stupidest things come out of my mouth, even well-intentioned ones, right? So perhaps she doesn't actually think those things. So naturally, I did what any journalist would do. I reached out to SUSE for their side of the story on this. They got back to me. The CEO did not distance herself from her statement or the ideas behind it in any way, not even a little. A later response was provided in the form of a tweet which read, and I quote, "We dare to be different, to be diverse, to be inclusive, to be open, and have been so every day for 27 years. Again, though, no distancing of herself from the anti-conservative political statements that she made as the CEO of SUSE. Yeah. So consider this. I just presented 3 well-documented examples of very different types, right? Different types, and I would say different severities as well, just in very different ways. The first, a conference organizer and keynote speaker encouraging and advocating for criminal activity against people based on skin color, white, and gender, male. A foundation and event discriminating based on perceived political leanings, in this case, conservative. Now, I should make this clear. That is an assumption. It is my assumption that the foundation, the Linux Foundation and event were discriminating based on perceived political leanings. It seems like a very obvious assumption, and I've posited this before. I've made multiple requests for the Linux Foundation for clarification. None has been given, but it does make sense. The evidence points to that. The fact that they haven't refuted that even one time, even though it would be super easy to do, and even though they've made plenty of random little statements here and there and other things, it makes the mind think this probably is what's going on here. But again, I would like to make that point clearly. Mouth working, not that we don't know for sure. I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt, even when it doesn't seem like they deserve it. And the third example was a CEO speaking publicly negatively about political ideology, in this case, conservatism, while equating it with negative traits such as bigotry. 3 types: a call to action, a direct taken action, and a disparaging sentiment. Then consider the results of the poll. 17.5% have been the victim of discrimination based on politics. That rate is nearly double that of either ethnicity or religion, which are already way too high. Higher than 0 is too high, but those are already way too high. All those numbers are just way too high. Here's the thing. All bigotry is bad. All hate is bad, period. There is 0 room for debate there. Yet here we are in 2020. Bigotry, discrimination, and let's call it what it is, hate, are so common that over 50% of those in the tech industry are afraid to talk in public, away from work, about these topics, for fear that someone might find out, that someone at work will sniff them out and they'll know that they have a political or religious idea in their head. That is the environment that has been cultivated and allowed to be cultivated by our tech leadership. So where do we go from here? Well, first I want to reiterate something. I do not want to see anyone punished for the examples in this article. I mentioned that at the top of the article, and I mention it here. Demonizing and vilifying each other only breeds more hate. Do I disagree with such hateful statements and actions? You bet your sweet bippy I do. Heavens to Betsy. Murgatroyd even. I'm not sure it would be possible to disagree with them any more than I do. But people are people, and people make mistakes, even the best of us. I'd be willing to bet good money that everyone involved on those 3 examples I showed you above is a solidly good person with a good heart. So, how do we fix things? How do we allow all people to feel not discriminated against within their workplace? Clearly, a lot of people currently do, and for a pretty wide variety of reasons. Discrimination based on ethnicity, gender, political affiliation, age, religion, all of it, they're all way too high. How do we make that go away? Personally, I feel that if we all simply adopt the be excellent to each other approach to life, we'd be good to go. And that's really the only idea I've got there. I don't necessarily know how to fix things. I notice when stuff's happening. How to fix it, I truly don't know. But again, I thank you for listening. Thank you for thinking about it. Thank you, hopefully, for being excellent to other people around you. And hopefully, none of you are contributing. Where's that slide up here? There we go. There's that one. None of you are contributing to any of the discrimination happening here. Any of the ethnicity, age, religion, gender, politics, none of it. Or any of the other things you can discriminate against a person for. Disability. There's so many things. Spoken language. I've seen people get discriminated against because of the language they spoke or because of their accent. Oh man, I've seen those sorts of things happen all the time. The reality is discrimination happens. And it sucks. It's just happening an awful lot in the tech industry right now. And it's happening for reasons and in ways that a lot of people aren't talking about. And I think they should be. I think that chart alone says we need to be talking about a couple of things. And we need to put a damper on all the hate we throw at each other based on politics and the such. All right. What was I going to say here? Oh, yeah. Once again, thank you to everyone who helps make this show possible. Thanks to the Patreon supporters. And thanks to Linode. Linode is just amazing. If you go to linode.com/Lunduke, you can get yourself an awesome little Linux hosting package, set up yourself a WordPress blog, set up yourself a mud. You gotta have your own mud. And what's really cool is if you do that right now, they give you $60 in hosting credits. If you do it via the linode.com/Lunduke, you get $60 of hosting credits. That goes a heck of a long way. I mean, you can set up a whole server to run everything that I do at Linode for less than that. It's definitely worth checking out. And thank you again to everyone who is cool to each other. If you are out there being excellent to each other, you just keep on keeping on. And the rest of you guys, look to the other ones as an example. All right, I'll see everyone tomorrow.